Productivity has a secret, and that secret can be found in a cup of coffee. Welcome to 17th century England, a time when coffee was pretty new in Europe, but would not remain new for very long. Coffee grew in popularity quickly. By the end of the 1600s, London alone had over 1,000 coffee shops. Tom Standish historian...
Wait. Okay, Josh, this is interesting and everything, but what does this have to do with productivity? Okay, let me show you a couple clips.
Rich people don't sleep 8 hours a day. That's a third of your life.
I get 8 hours of sleep. I prioritize it.
Nobody you know has actually created success without working their face off.
Make money and this is how you do, like that to me is super toxic.
And then just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in, 80 to 100 hour weeks every week.
Productivity is not about just doing more.
He works. He produces. The guy's there every day. The guy's pushing and shoving.
Promoting bad mental health and promoting toxic productivity.
Okay, before you start, yes, I took all these clips out of context, but only to highlight the problem.
See, most of us want to become more productive so we can get more work done, create more, and therefore become more successful, just like how these titans advised us. But we need to, right? Of course, in order for a modern society to function, we need a lot of people working very hard to produce goods and services that are solving problems for humanity. But if this is your definition of success, and this is what you believe you should be, because you want to be valued, you want to feel like you're doing a good job and that you matter. And if you do not meet these standards of near perfection, how do you feel? Like trash, and not even the recyclable kind. We need awareness around mental health. But every time I hear a story from either side of the fence, I'm always met with a fixed sense of resistance. Because I think that both of these stories don't really give you a clear illustration of what productivity is. And it annoys me. But productivity is pretty simple, isn't it? It's just using your time more efficiently so you can get more done. Yes, that is a part of it, but it's not the whole story. And it's also a part of the problem too. See, productivity has an equation, and it's very simple. It's just what is produced divided by what is consumed. Keep that in mind because that'll become very useful.
To understand this story of productivity, we need to understand the lie we have been told, and where it all started. Our starting line is the emergence of coffee. By the end of this video, my hope is that you see productivity in a different light. So, where were we? Through the World in 6 Glasses wrote, coffee has provided an entirely new environment for social, intellectual, commercial and political exchange, making them the crucibles for scientific and financial revolutions that shaped the modern world. This may seem like a stretch, but seriously, before coffee, England was covered by a drunken haze. Beer was drunk for breakfast, lunch and dinner, but as coffee consumption increased, that haze began to clear. Writer and historian James Howe noted this change in tides quite early on. In 1660 he noted, "'Tis found already that this coffee drink has caused greater sobriety among the nation, whereas formerly apprentices and clerks with others used to take their morning draught in ale, beer or wine, which by the dizziness they cause in the brain, make many unfit for business. They use now to play the good fellows in this civil and wakeful drink." Coffee houses literally became the social hotspot for reasoned and sober debates on topics such as politics, science, literature, poetry, commerce, and religion. They soon became known as penny universities. For the price of one cup of coffee, you could find education despite whatever class you fell into, as long as you were a man. This age of reason and rational thought is what we call the period of the Enlightenment. It was the ideologies of Thomas Hobbes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Baron de Montesquieu, Voltaire, Immanuel Kant, Denis Diderot, and others that have been adapted into the modern world that we live in today. These intellectual giants were fueled by coffee. For example, Voltaire supposedly drank as much as 72 cups of coffee per day.
So why did coffee have such a profound impact through Europe? Well, there are many reasons, but one really interesting reason is because of a little chemical called 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. It's a chemical nearly all of us are addicted to. Its common name is caffeine. But here's where the story takes a bit of a turn. It is not a coincidence that the dawn of caffeine and the creation of the minute hand on clocks arrived at the same historical time. Previously, there was no need to subdivide the hour, particularly for people doing physical labour outside. The position of the sun was far more important to them than the position of a clock hand. But that changed quickly as work transitioned towards being indoors. For the first time ever, work has been regularised and routinized into shifts. Shifts that caffeine could help enforce by altering individual states of consciousness. No longer were we bound by our circadian rhythm or the position of the sun. Caffeine allowed us to adapt our bodies and our minds to the requirements of modern life. You know, I've always thought of England as a tea drinking culture, not a coffee one.
But it started with coffee, because tea was way too expensive for the working class people to afford. It was not until the British East India Company stole the secrets of tea production from the Chinese and then captured land in Assam, India, forcing the locals into servitude was tea made cheap enough to mass produce. Now the Western world had an abundance of cheap tea, and they loved it. So did the employers. The introduction of tea in the Western world was all about exploitation, not just of the Indian servants producing the tea, but also the consumers of the tea, the workers. The heavily sweetened tea allowed workers to endure brutally long shifts, sometimes as long as 18 hours, in horrible working conditions and in constant state of hunger. Employers realised that caffeine helped bend humans to the will of the machine and the requirements of a new economic order. But eventually the camel's back broke, and in the beginning of the 20th century there became a global effort to implement the 8-hour workday, and it was a long and bloody fight.
Man, and here we are, heroed for working really long hours.
Yep, in the 1920s, the impact of coffee and tea on the workplace was studied very closely. A consensus emerged that it led to an increased capacity for work. Its primary function is to increase concentration, focus, and alertness. It does not make people smarter, but it makes people faster. It played an arguably significant role in the formulation of ideologies from the Enlightenment that has shaped the modern world that we have today. And during the Industrial Revolution, it transformed people to be better suited to working in factories and offices during the day or at night shifts.
So it seems like caffeine was one of the discoveries that has changed the psychology and biology of humans, like the utilization of fire. But at what cost?
In order to meet the demand for tea in England, Indians in Assam were forced into servitude. Since Britons loved sweetening their tea with sugar, the slave industry in the Caribbean needed to expand to increase the supply of sugar from plantations. An estimate of 70% on the entire slave trade was supported by the sugar industry. In order to meet the demands of coffee in the Western world, slaves were exported from Africa to Brazil. This is not the case anymore, but only a fraction of the process made from each coffee sold makes its way back to the farmers. All because the Westerners want to be more productive? No. Sure, we enjoy the mental clarity as the brain fog faded, which contributed to the demand of caffeine. But it was the employers of businesses that wanted more out of the workers, and caffeine provided the solution to that problem. The consumption of caffeine has never been about increasing productivity. It's been about exploitation. How much money can I make from these slaves? How much labor can I get out of my employees? Simply put, how can I increase my output?
And that's probably why you drink coffee or tea. Increase productivity? No. You just want to do more. You just want to cross everything off your list. What, and that's a bad thing? No, but it can become a problem if you only focus on your output. What do you mean? It'll become clearer soon. Fine. Besides, coffee gives me an energy boost. Actually, that's wrong.
If it did, it would break the third law of thermodynamics, because caffeine has 0 calories. You're just exploiting yourself by borrowing energy from the future. Caffeine works by blocking the receptors that interact with adenosine. When adenosine concentrations increase in the brain, you feel sleepy. Neuroscientists call this sleep pressure, but even when you are caffeinated, adenosine still builds up. The caffeine just inhibits your brain from noticing. Once the liver removes the caffeine from circulation, all that adenosine held back pours into your receptors, and you crash. So when you consume caffeine, you're really just creating the illusion that you're not tired. In fact, you're making yourself more tired because caffeine impairs the quality of sleep, and then you have more caffeine to make up for it. A lack of sleep has been found to contribute to Alzheimer's, MS, stroke, heart pressure, depression, anxiety, suicide, and obesity.
And you call that productive? Well, no, not when you put it like that. See, normally people only factor in time into their consumption of resources.
But that doesn't account for the stress, anxiety, or other health effects associated with draining yourself. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is rest and get some sleep to allow your resources to build back up again.
Oh, so it's like a rest day from the gym to allow your muscles to recover. Yes, exactly. But in the modern world, we champion busyness and condemn rest as a weakness. And there's an excellent but terrible reason for this. It's called the greatest propaganda campaign in the history of humankind. It's not crucial to understanding our story of productivity, so I'm not going to go into detail here. But believe me, you have been manipulated, and I'm going to come back to this in another video.
Okay, let's look at productivity from a different angle now. You spend your time at a company and are rewarded for your efforts in the form of money. The company exists in an attempt to solve a problem. How well the company solves the problem determines how successful the company becomes. You provide value to the company, and the company provides value to society. As a result, a problem that people face gets resolved, and the quality of life increases.
Which is a good thing, right? Absolutely, but in practice, it isn't always this straightforward.
Let's revisit the productivity equation. Imagine you are the owner of a business that produces shirts. It typically costs $30 to produce one shirt. an employee comes up with the idea of using a different machine that can increase the production of shirts per hour from 10 to 15. This increased output lowers the labor time of each shirt and results in the cost of each shirt to fall to $28. Congratulations, you increase your company's productivity by 6.7%. Next door, your rival comes up with the idea of switching the type of cotton that it uses. This type of cotton requires more time being spinned into a thread and a little bit more time being weaved into a fabric. The production rate is lower from 10 shirts per hour to 6, resulting in the production cost of each shirt to rise from $30 to $50. Hence, productivity decreased by 66.7%. Obviously, you're doing a much better job than your rival, but maybe it isn't so obvious.
I know what you're doing. Okay, bear with me for a little bit. A little while ago, Veritasium released this video, Why We Can't Have Nice Things. Have you seen it? Yeah man, it's a banger. A banger. Yep. A banger.
Anyway, in the video, Derek explains that things were intentionally made worse. Previously I said that businesses exist to solve problems, and they do, but sometimes the solution to the problem is so effective that the problem no longer exists.
So what do? You create a product that solves a problem in the short term, but never in the long term.
The example Derek talks about is light bulbs. Decades ago, we had the technology to make a light bulb that would effectively last forever. Instead of selling these light bulbs, a cartel was created that lowered the lifespan of the bulbs. This strategy is known as
planned obsolescence.
And the tactic is applied by many of the biggest companies today. Probably most famously is the lawsuit filed against Apple as a result of Casey Neistat's iPod video.
Yeah, I remember that.
But this isn't the only way companies can utilize obsolescence. As Derek continues to explain, General Motors experimented with new colors for their cars. Each year they'll release new cars with different colors, making the previous model feel outdated and therefore encouraging the consumers to go out and buy the newest version. They effectively created a problem in the minds of consumers and provided a solution to the very problem they created, which they were rewarded for doing so. If we were to look at the balance sheets of these businesses, we would see that production rates increase, number of sales increase, and the dollar cost per item would decrease. Hence, their productivity would increase. But there are many factors that contribute to the expenses which are not clearly represented in a balance sheet, like the cost of greenhouse gas emissions, the depletion of valuable materials and resources, the effects of deforestation, the effects of employees' health both physically and mentally. Whenever we create something, large amounts of energy and resources are consumed. This isn't a bad thing if the problem we are solving helps further progress humanity, but as we have seen, this is generally not the case. Let's return to our shirt example. Your increased production rate has lowered the lifespan of the shirts by 1 year, which means yes, you get more sales, but you are consuming more cotton, more electricity, more water, your emissions are greater, and the supply chain total consumption of resources would increase. Your rival, on the other hand, switched to a more durable, more sustainable type of cotton. It requires half the amount of water to grow, and each shirt's lifespan increased by 3 years. Their production emissions may not change since the machines are operated for the same amount of time. However, the total consumption of resources for their supply chain would likely decrease, since the quality of the shirt is better and more premium price can be charged. Additionally, because more time can be spent on each shirt, they decide to allow customers to bring back their shirts to be repaired at a reasonable fee. Since their customers are greatly satisfied, they are more likely to be returning customers and tell their friends and family about the shirts. At the end of the financial year, it turns out they generated more revenue with less consumption of resources and therefore had a lower impact on the world. Who's been more productive? Who's been more efficient?
Obviously my rival, but that's not a fair comparison. Yes, you're completely right. I made up the numbers and I'm definitely biased. And this scenario isn't going to hold up in every situation.
But in the book Let My People Go Surfing, Yvon states that every time Patagonia did the right thing for the environment, they were rewarded economically for it. John Maynard Keynes wrote a famous essay in 1930 called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. In it, he predicted that by 2030, people would only work 15 hours per week. In those 15 hours, we could produce everything that we need. Obviously, he was wrong, but maybe not for the reason that you think. Every time productivity increased, we chose to work more and produce more. Every time power plants became more efficient, we burnt more coal. When workers made productivity gains due to the consumption of caffeine, employees forced their workers to do more hours. When we worked out how to mass-produce tea and sugar, the slave industry expanded. Every time we increased the efficiency on a microchip, we produced more phones and computers. Every time you become more efficient at a task, you end up doing more work. We increased productivity so we could increase output, not lower consumption. We use the resources around us like they were never-ending commodities. Since industrialization, we've been so focused on output that we have forgotten or outright ignored the harm that we are doing or have done. I have no issue with increasing output if it's generally a solution to a problem worth solving, because that's how we progress humanity. But it does not always work like this. In some cases we could solve the problem entirely, but chose against it to maximize industrial output. Remember the light bulbs. In other cases we created the problem and solved it to maximize industrial output. Remember General Motors experimented with new colours for their cars. And then there are other problems that are not even worth solving from an efficiency perspective, but we were tricked in seeing the value it provided. Again, to maximize industrial output.
So why would people do this? Is it for the pursuit of money, greed, power? Maybe they believe they were doing the right thing, but based off what we have seen in history, that would seem unlikely.
But I do know this, and I'll say it again, in the modern world, productivity has not been about efficiency. It's been about exploiting resources to maximize output. If we keep continuing this model of productivity, focusing solely on output and eventually running out of resources, what happens?
I'm not sure. Well, what happens to you as an individual who's working so hard to be productive without any maintenance or any rest? You burn out. Exactly. Until you recover, until your batteries recharge, life will be a lot more difficult.
We can all agree that working yourself to the point of burnout is not productive, but that's the direction the world is heading. Once we use up all the resources available to us, there will be a massive economical burnout, as predicted by numerous models, and we are ahead of schedule for a disaster. It's not that economic growth is unsustainable, but our model of productivity is. We simply can't keep doing what we currently are.
I'm still not convinced. Look at the attention economy.
Creators have been told that in order to stay relevant, you have to keep producing more content, more views, more clicks, more likes. I mean, you don't have to go very far to find stories or creators feeling uninspired and burning out. And then there's you, on the other side, spending copious amount of time on a platform designed to keep you there so you can see more advertisements and hopefully make more purchases. But then you realize how much time you wasted and then you feel guilty about not being productive. So you go off looking for productivity hacks which may include a product that you buy to help you become more productive. But in reality, you're just consuming more. So you see the individual's problem of productivity is no different than the capitalist problem of productivity.
Okay, so since you're clearly an expert in all this, what can we do about it? No, I am not an expert. And if you want to learn from actual experts, there are some resources down in the description.
Since you asked for my opinion, here's what I think we can do on a basic level. I think it starts with everyone just asking themselves, what's it all for anyway? What are we trying to achieve here? On an individual level, we need to learn that rest is productive, sleep is productive. The better you feel, the healthier you are, the more productive you'll be on average. Work hard for a reason, not just for its own sake, and become aware of when it's necessary to back off and recuperate. But I feel the need to state this. If you find yourself constantly struggling to achieve things that actually need to get done, the general rule of thumb is to eliminate distractions and use software to automate tedious tasks where possible. There are thousands of videos out there to give you some ideas, so I'm not going to go into detail here. Once you become more efficient, reward yourself by taking the freed up time to do things you enjoy and that matter to you. Additionally, at an individual level, work at what you value and spend your money on that. Try your best to lower your consumption. Not only will this help you save more dollars, but it'll also tell companies, hey, we're not going to buy your useless products. And if you are particularly conscious, you can find ways to support businesses that are actively trying to do good things.
What about at a business or government level?
Employees need to realize that workers who are properly rested without a debilitating level of stress will perform better, and better performing employees can only mean good things for the company. Also, there's data to show that employees don't need to work a full 8 hours each day to complete their jobs, but I'll tell that story another day. We need teams of researchers and business people collaborating together to find more efficient processes that lower our consumption of resources. As people are working very hard to produce new technologies that can make these processes more efficient, the way we work will change. Governments need to be working alongside businesses to formulate methods of how they can construct our current economic model away from industrial output to something more sustainable. In the short term, it may be beneficial for governments to create a monetary cost of a company's emissions. This could be done in the form of a carbon tax. It would allow companies to factor in some environmental impact into their productivity equation. Additionally, it would be an incentive to lower emissions because who wants to pay taxes?
If there is one thing to take away from this video, it should be thinking about productivity in terms of finding more efficient processes that lowers the consumption of resources, instead of focusing purely on individual or industrial output. You know, it's hard to make these videos without coming off as ungrateful. I am grateful. The fact that I can actually make these videos is a testament to how far we have come. I do not think for a second that we could have achieved everything we have achieved without some level of exploitation of resources. Knowing what we know now, we may have done things differently. But regardless, we are in a unique situation. Today we effectively have the light bulb that will last forever. And we should be doing everything we can to make every product and every process as efficient as LED light bulbs. As Derek said, the only form of obsolescence we should support is technological, and if we don't, then there are 3 possible outcomes I see. 1. We leave Earth behind as envisioned by Elon Musk. 2. We regress back to a society pre-industrialization. And 3. We become known as a species that could have been. Okay, so that's it for this video. But before you click off, I just want to take a moment to really thank you for watching till the end. It really does mean a lot. You know, I wanted to make this video on productivity because this argument, whether for or against, it really annoys me. So I hope that this video has provided some value to you. As always, remain hopeful, get some rest. I'll see you next month.